just want to thank you, first off, for looking at my webpage, and I just want to thank the people that help you to give you information about my webpage. Anyways, I guess you're seeking some solutions for your life. Maybe you're struggling with addictions, or maybe with such things as low self-esteem, negative self-image, depression, maybe some other addictive, destructive, self-defeating behaviors. Well, first off, once again, thank you for searching my webpage, and for the person that gave it to you, the information about it. Anyways, I just want to talk to you today about my own journey. You know, by the grace of God that I'm even able to be here right now talking to you about this. I've had many struggles in my own life, and before I begin, I don't blame any people, places, or things for the choices and consequences I myself created. But I will begin with starting off with my story. Anyways, I was raised in a home that didn't really help out as much as giving me self-esteem, self-confidence, negative self-image. These are things that I believe that we need as individuals to be able to succeed in life, to be able to make right choices, to be able to have positive thought processes and positive self-image and so forth. Anyways, as some of you have already looked into my book and seen on my webpage what it talks about, it mentions that I was born and raised into a family where alcoholism, along with other dysfunctions, where they were manifested. Anyways, being raised in that home, you know, it was difficult, to say the least, at a young age. My father was involved in a car accident before I was born, and in that accident he had been under the influence of alcohol. And what ended up happening in that accident is that a mother and a father were killed in that car accident, and a child was left paralyzed. And I mentioned this in my book. But I don't want to I don't want to emphasize that so much. But what I do want to emphasize is that my thought processes around these events in my life, these circumstances and events, and even the consequences of somebody else, they made me have a negative self-image of myself. You know, there was the typical dysfunction in the home, the abusive father with the mental, physical, and emotional abuse. But you know, my father suffered too from some of the things that I myself found myself suffering from. My father could not cope with life in a positive way after that accident specifically, and he would choose to medicate, you know, behind alcohol and drugs, and it would turn on him, and he would eventually lose all of us. But the damage that would be done in that home because of his active addiction, it would create an environment to where I did not feel, I felt different. I felt like I never fit in. I felt like there was always something wrong with me. From the thoughts that I had, you know, as a little kid, I always thought, you know, negative things, you know, because we were poor. I always, you know, entertained ideas on how I could get a lot of money, and sometimes that led to thinking things about robbing cars, armored cars, or stealing, and so forth. Before I would become active in addiction to substances and alcohol, I would actually remember very clearly that at a young age I began to do things in my life, do and say things, you know, to try to make sense of my world. I would actually begin lying and stealing. At a young age, I remember stealing this toy from my neighbor. You know, I grew up to this family, and God bless them. You know, they had everything materially you could think of that, you know, that any kid my age would want. I don't know really what went on in that home. I would know years later, as an adult, because I still live in the same home, in my same hometown, that the family would end up in divorce after the children would leave high school, and there was a lot of problems there in that home. But this is my story. So I remember, you know, those children that lived next door to me, they always had the newest of toys. And, you know, we grew up poor, so sometimes, you know, I would get a toy, you know, at least one toy for Christmas and so forth, and my mom would try to make do, you know. I had a wonderful mother. You know, she came here to this country, married my father, didn't speak any English. You know, but she, you know, she instilled things in me today that you know, they are from her, like compassion and kindness towards other people. And she also instilled me my strong belief in God that would carry me through, that would eventually bring me to that place, to the place where I'm at today, even able to just tell you my story. Anyways, so I remember our neighbors playing with these little toys. We had some Hot Wheels, and we would gather in between the houses, and we would make these little dirt paths on the ground, and in between our lawns there was a little patch of dirt. There was no lawn there. And I remember we would make these little trails, and we'd pretend, little kids playing with cars. And I remember one time stealing one of the cars. I was envious, and I just thought that car would make me feel good if I just had it. And I remember taking that car. And I remember something even more important about that is that, I remember having that car in my room. And when we would go to play with these cars outside, and I remember lying to my friends, telling them I didn't steal it, and they know that I had to have stolen it, but lying and lying and lying that I didn't steal it. Well, I remember, that the shame I felt about that car being in my house. I couldn't play with it. All I could do was look at it. It became actually a curse to me, that having stole that. So anyways, that was the beginning, that was about 6 years old, 5, 6, 7 years old, that I started to do these behaviors. And the reason why I'm talking about these behaviors is because I would eventually become addicted to anything that would change the way I felt. I tried to manipulate my insides by doing things externally, and I would actually pursue that for many, many years. But I remember clearly, the impact that had on me, that made me feel, that added to my low self-esteem, my negative self-image. And these are words I didn't know back then. I just knew that I felt bad. I didn't have names for them, depression, and stuff like that. I just didn't fit in. There was something wrong with me. I always felt there was something wrong with me. So anyways, I would soon discover that there was other kids in the neighborhood too that felt the same way. And usually there was either abuse, some type of abuse in the family, dysfunction, sometimes alcoholism. But what ended up happening is that we would all gravitate towards each other. And I remember starting smoking cigarettes at a young age, and Mom used to let me. She didn't let me, but she would rather me be out than be at home. Because see, when I was at home is when my father would actually take his anger out on me. And that's just how it was. I don't blame anybody. It's just that's how it was. And even then, as I speak to you right now, God had a plan, because see, all that helped to nurture who I am today. Had none of that happened, I wouldn't have sought out my relationship with God, who would eventually transform my entire life, my thinking, beginning with my thinking. So anyways, at about 12 years old, and it seems like as I've been in recovery, and that's about the standard age, 11, 12, 13 years old, is when we started to experiment with alcohol and drugs. Pot. That's what it was at that time. We called it pot, marijuana. And I remember that it did for me what I wanted it to do. And it was my escape. It was my escape from my reality. And that's all I ever wanted. I just wanted peace. I just wanted to be okay with me. Well, when I found these people, these younger kids just like myself, or similar to myself, I actually began to fit in. Mom didn't like me running the streets, 10, 11, 12 years old back in the 70s, but it was better than me being at home and my father beating on me, And as I go further in my story, I just want to tell you that because God, and because of my recovery, God has healed my relationship with my father. There was a time, and I carried a resentment towards my father for about 27 years. There was a time I wanted to kill him. I even plotted it in my head how to carry it out. But it would be God that would actually change that in my heart, to where I would ask Him to forgive me. My father, ask Him to forgive me, and I knew that I needed to have a right relationship with Him. He's still alive today. He's active in his alcoholism still, but I love him. I honor him. He is my only biological father, and I pray for him, and I work on a relationship with him even to this day. But anyways, at about 12 and 13 years old, I actually began putting substances or liquids in my body that would change the way I felt. And I knew that even though I knew that it was wrong, I knew that it was just straight wrong. It did what I wanted it to do, and that was to escape my pain, my reality. I would pursue this addiction to alcohol and drugs, and it just wouldn't stop there. It would begin now to be involved with sex, with girls. And basically, what happened is I would pursue this for about another 25 years. And in the process of pursuing this, I began to create consequences. Some of them severe, actually a lot of them severe, and even some that are still with me to this day. By the grace of God, I'm still walking through them. Well, during that process, I knew that it was wrong. I knew that drugs were illegal, but I was compelled and obsessed to use these. Even at the risk of creating more damage. 'Cause I didn't, quite frankly, I didn't think about the consequences of it thoroughly. But all I knew, I just needed immediate escape from the pain of my life and my thoughts. Eventually, I would come to a place, and throughout this entire time, let me regress here. Throughout this entire time, Mom had always had gotten us off to Sunday school. She'd always had us involved in church, and so my beliefs in God were very, very strong. I never once in my life, as I reflect back even now, I've never once rejected the belief or idea that there's a supreme being, a God. So I've always believed. But in that belief system, and some of the doctrines of the churches I was involved in, they didn't teach the scriptures correct to me, basically, I didn't understand a word that would actually it would transform my life, and that word was grace. I didn't know that God loved me, no matter how bad and immoral I was. He still loved me, and He hurt to see me, live out and behave the way I was living, because He knew the consequences. But nonetheless, it's true to me, because there's been many times in my life I should have been dead. I mean, I would eventually get involved in alcohol, and especially drugs, to where I began selling them. And I began selling methamphetamines. And in that life, there's a lot of crime tied to that life. A lot of murder, a lot of robbing, a lot of stealing. It's just bad all the way around. Well, I was part of that crowd. And there was many times that guns had been drawn on me, or I drew guns, and there's many times that I shouldn't be here today. But it was God's grace that watched over me. He had a plan, and He knew that I would be someday sitting right here with you right now, talking about this. So anyways, I suffered many, many consequences, but not enough to where the pain of living would bring me to the point, and the hopelessness and the desperation, that I would actually surrender even my belief system, my philosophies and my ideologies, and even my understanding of the true written word of the Bible. Because quite frankly, to this point, it wasn't working. I believed in God, but I didn't know how to trust God. Which brings me to, what needed to happen for me was I needed to actually get down to causes and conditions on why I thought, felt, and believed. Not only about myself, but about everybody around me and the world around me. And it would take a lot of pain. The pain of existing the way I was greater than the fear of surrender. And in that surrender, I had opened up myself to God. First off, it took that I believed that He did exist. But more importantly, I believed that He was going to be my only solution. See, not everybody has to go to the depths that I had to, of sinking to that bottom, of total destruction of everything that you cherish and love in life. But that's what it took for me. And it took that for me, so that I could share this with others. But that's what it took. It took an absolute brokenness to where I had to leave all philosophies, ideals, and even my belief system. That had to be put on the table and on the altar of God, and an absolute surrender. And at that point, He started to teach me about how my thinking had to change. Romans 12:1 talks about, "Be ye therefore transformed by the renewing of your mind." That's what had to change in me. See, I had been conditioned to believe and think a certain way. We're taught that in school at a young age that if we're smart, and we succeed, we have things, we have the white picket fence, we have the good job, we have the bank account with this much money, we vacation here, we hang out with these crowds, we drive these cars, we're conditioned to believe that if we could just achieve, that we've attained life. And therefore we are good people, and therefore we should feel good about ourselves. Well, that wasn't the case with me, because, from the gate I had learning disabilities. So I would never be able to have that good job to where I can have all those things. So that added to the negativity about myself. So see, it went down really deep. It went down to what I thought and felt and perceived about myself was directly proportional related to how I related to the world around me, and even having intimate relationships with other people. I don't mention this much, and it's not in my book, but I was molested as a kid. And, God, I forgave the individuals, and I understand that these things, they just keep going until they're broken, this cycle. And I understand that the people that molested me, they were molested as well. And understanding that, our sin just keeps going, it progresses. The Bible says that it goes to the third and fourth generations, and even more so. So, it wasn't a matter of me hating the person that did this to me. It's just, how did I process this? Well, I thought that there was something wrong with me. I thought that maybe I was gay, or there was something wrong with me. I didn't even know the word gay back then, but I just thought there was something wrong with me. So in order for me and my small mind at that time, limited understanding of life around me, I would actually, engage in sexual activity. And I would actually, every time that I was with the female, it was like I was smashing that lie that there was something wrong with me. Because I felt, why would this happen to me? Was I feminine? What was wrong? So anyways, I don't talk much about that because I just don't, because the people that actually molested me, they're still alive and they're still close to me, and quite frankly, I don't know if they can handle this. They're not at the place where I'm at to where I'm free from it. The devil can no longer beat me up behind it. It's just, that's what it is. It is what it is. It's not a matter of blaming people. It's just a matter, of what am I going to do about it, and how is God going to right-size me around surrendering that thing. So anyways, my addictions would take me to places that quite frankly, I'm ashamed to say, but they were some really bad places. And I repeatedly tried to change my life many times on my own, but was unable to. Every time I got in trouble, with the law, because I would eventually end up serving time in prison. But every time I got in trouble with law, I wanted to change, and I tried everything within me to change. But, as soon as problems or obstacles or things would happen in my life, and, I was trying to do the right thing, but eventually, I would get discouraged, disappointed, and I didn't know how to trust God, during all those valleys. And I would eventually succumb to what always worked, and it was the going backwards. And that was to my old behavior, to that medicated, numb state of escape. Eventually, after so many times of that happening and having to rebuild my life so many times, I got to the place of life, a point of life, to where I no longer wanted to live. And to think of going backwards to drugs and alcohol, I would rather die than go back to that, because I had actually understood all the way to the innermost part of my being that alcohol and drugs were just making things worse. And I knew that, and I knew the mountain of consequences and wreckage I was going to have to clean up. I knew that was part of it. Running was part of it. And I'm not stupid. I would eventually learn that I'm not stupid, and quite frankly, I'm pretty intelligent. I would eventually, after I entered in recovery and allowed God to be God in my life, I would eventually go to college, and I would earn my human services degree and carry a 3.6 GPA, honor roll student, and that would eventually smash the lies about the devil telling me you're stupid and you'll never learn, and you have a learning disability and so forth. So basically, there was a lot of things that had to change on the inside of me, but it was only going to be through the loving hand of God and His grace and mercy and compassion, and Him sending people my way that would actually get me to start processing thoughts, feelings, and emotions. And it had to do with a lot of writing and a lot of being transparent with others. When I shared about being molested with my friend and my sponsor and my guide, there was a weight that was lifted from me. Because see, I had carried that shame for many, many years. Nobody knew about that. Besides the people that actually did this to me. But it was a secret that I kept deep down inside. And I truly believe that you're only as sick as the secrets you keep. Well, that secret is what the devil had been using on me, to keep me isolated from others. So anyways, it would actually take getting that secret out and actually start to uncover a lot of other stuff in my life. And I got to see, how fear, how deep-rooted it is in me. And how, it chooses every day, it tries every day to dominate my actions and my thoughts, and so forth. And anyway, so it was through working the 12 steps of recovery, which I know are Bible-based, that God would get me to a place to where I would learn to trust Him. And in the process of learning to trust Him, He's helped me to recreate my life to where I'm a law-abiding citizen. I pay taxes. I have respect in my community. I would eventually even write a book. My vision and goal for that book when I wrote it was for it to enter into the prison systems and all institutions, whether they're psychiatric facilities, homeless shelters, prison systems, correctional detention facilities for youth, juvenile halls. That was my vision and my goal. And to this day it hasn't happened. It's a small publishing company, and quite frankly, I can't afford to pay for my book and give it away. I know God is able, but I don't really know nothing about how to get that book out in the mainstream. I just know that God gave me the idea to write this book, and I did. I have learned so much more since writing that book, that just because I became a Christian, just because I got clean and sober, just because I'm doing the right things, that doesn't mean that there's not consequences of our past that are here. But I know that God's grace is sufficient for me. Because when I am really going through things is when I lean more on Him. And that is actually when I am the strongest. It's when He's working through me. So His grace is sufficient for me. But, I say all this to tell you, my book was a book of hope. And no matter how far you went down the ladder, no matter how many consequences you have, in your life, and that you're carrying still, God is there. He was there for me. And I know He's there for you. I would love to correspond with anybody through email. I would love for people to get a hold of my book. I'm in the process of writing a second book, which is going to be called Working Through the Wreckage. Because, I believe this, that if you don't allow God to help you to clean up your past, the devil will throw your past in your face and in your future, which will keep you bound back to depression, anxiety, discouragement, disappointment, despair, hopelessness, which is a breeding ground for us to choose to go and medicate behind behaviors. It doesn't have to be alcohol and drugs. It can be all kinds of behaviors, And it's only at that place where God reveals Himself to us. I believe in Jeremiah 29:11. And that's what happened to me. When you seek me with all, it states this, when you seek me with all your heart, I will let myself be found by you and bring you out of your captivity and bondage. That doesn't mean when you seek Him with your intellect and your knowledge or your past experiences. That means when you seek Him with a brokenness, knowing that He's going to be your only solution. At that point, I believe when you work those are the first 3 steps. When you come to understand how much you need Jesus, I believe that's when God begins to reveal Himself through you. And it begins with a peace. And with that peace comes a hope. With that hope comes a courage. With that courage comes a willingness. With that willingness comes changes. And with those changes comes confidence. To where actually you begin to start seeing God's hand in your life. And you start to understand how our self-will tries to fight Him in our lives. But as we surrender, we take those fears and we surrender them to Him, He begins to do the impossible in our lives. God will do for us what we can't do for ourselves. And in the process, as He rebuilds our lives, we are to do what I'm doing right now, trying to reach others. Because it's truly, by His grace that I am today who I am. Would I change anything in my life? Anything that happened? I've thought about that. I've thought about that very, very hard. And I would have to say no. Because everything that happened in my life, it shapes and forms who I am today. And who I am today is I still have problems. Today I have quality problems. Not like before when I used to produce chaos, crisis, and confusion in my life. Today I have quality problems just like every other human being. But today, I know that I'm not alone. And I know that that's normal. And I've learned to be by myself. I've learned to be content within myself. And I've learned to face life on life's terms, good, bad, and indifferent. I've learned to process thoughts, feelings, and emotions, no matter what they are. I've learned to be able to talk to people, to be transparent with people. These are the tools for me that have transformed my life. So my book talks about this, but there's so much more that I've learned since then. I believe that I've matured in the Lord. I believe it's all about spiritual maturity now. So I would love to hear from you. My email, it's on my webpage. You can contact me, and I'm just excited about what God's going to do. I have a local ministry here that I'm involved in. Since I got into this field, I'm a helper. I try to help people, and I try to bring hope. Even though I work in a system that refuses to acknowledge God, there's a way to be a living witness without having to actually preach Jesus. He wants us to be to have compassion and love towards others, and you know, and to show up every day. So I thank you for visiting my website, and I just pray that God would have His will in your life, and that you would allow Him to have His will in your life, you know, and that you would be able to come to a living hope which is found in Christ Jesus. Thank you.